Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to show you how to tune the beloved Ferrari F50 of S-Class, but how you make it a beast in A-Class. So I've noticed that not many people have actually used this car. Very rarely have I seen it used in multiplayer lobbies, and I think the reason is most people don't know actually how to build it into A-Class. They think that from stock it's still sitting above 700 PI, so it's not able to be used. But truth be told, this car is an absolute beast. It's one of my favourite underrated cars in Forza, and it makes a brilliant all-rounder with some emphasis on grip. So just to give you an example of how good the car is, I took it around a couple of tracks, but it was Prague full that I found it to be particularly strong. So as you can see, we have a top 10 time there. I set this nearly 2 months ago, and that time that I got there, the 156.7, that actually put it 8th on the leaderboard. Since then, a couple of more people have used some of the OP Lotus 340R, which you can see near the top. But as you can tell, this car is competing against some really strong beasts of A-Class. Obviously the Lotus Exige, the 340R, we even have the Zagato, and then the Ford Mustang Hot Wheels edition, which we are literally sitting right behind. So it shows that this car is actually fantastic for momentum tracks. It's quite a difficult car to build though, because you have very little PI to play with if you want it in A-Class. But now that you've seen what it's capable of in Prague, I'll also let you know that it can do fantastic times around Watkins Glen full. I'm pretty sure it can do top 20 times there. And then obviously you have tracks like the Alps where it makes it a good contender against other grip cars. But with that said, let's get straight on to how can we build it into A-Class. I'm going to first walk you through just the engine parts first, because truth is there are no engine parts that we use whatever, so do not make the mistake of trying to put any parts in. Going over to the platform and handling, you can obviously decide between whether you have stock brakes or race brakes. The stock brakes, obviously that gives you 5 more PI, which is kind of important depending on what you want to do with the car, but in my opinion, to get the best out of this car you need the race brakes, because it makes it significantly lighter, as you can tell, over 50 pounds lighter. And obviously you can then play around with the braking balance, which I think is quite important for cars that have mid-engines or rear engines in the chassis. So we've gone with race brakes. Over to the springs. The stock springs allow you to tune, so nothing to change there. The chassis, we have actually gone for the race chassis roll cage, because it's all about that PI play. We need to find a way to squeeze it into the A700. It does add on 40 pounds obviously, but it's something that you just have to do. And then as for the weight reduction, we must keep it stock. There's just no chance whatsoever. But I tell you what, £2,700 is still okay for an A-Class car, so as long as we have plenty of grip. Clutch, there's no clutch with it. Tried to do it, but it's too much PI. Same for the transmission, you have to keep it as stock, and I will say this is the weakest thing about the F50. Off the line, you are always going to struggle against other cars because the launch on it is quite terrible. It bogs in first gear, but the truth is, as long as you can deal with that, you can make up a lot of ground with how fast this car can go around corners. So you know, it's not a deal breaker by any means, but you just have to be wary of that. Over to the driveline, we have had to keep it as stock. Differential, I always say it guys, you must include the race differential. I might even just make a daily reminder for everyone, make sure you have your race differential, because this is going to play into it very importantly, because we need to actually build this car and tune it so that it's got a bit more oversteer, just so we can make the most of that inherent grip it should have. Over to the tyres, the tyre compound we've kept as stock. The tyre width on the front we've had to keep as stock. Obviously, as you can see, the PI, it just bumps it up too high. Stock rear tyre width as well. It does only add 1 PI, but the truth is, if you're going to use the race brakes, you cannot do anything else to the car really. You're very limited, and I think you do need race brakes. By all means, try one without that. Then obviously you can get to play with adding some rear tyre width, front tyre width. But I'm not too sure if it's going to pan out the best for you with this car. Onto the rim style, I'm pretty sure it wasn't with sport rims. I went with the multi-piece rim style. No, forgive me, completely wrong actually. Specialised rims. So the fourth one along, it is the Asante AF134. So this is for the one that just gave us that perfect amount of weight that we needed. Obviously you have another option here, but the AF134 is what I went with. Obviously your preference, as long as it gets it into A700. Now on to the interesting thing, the aero. So if you have race brakes, you cannot afford to put in the race front bumper, unfortunately. As you can see, it bumps up the handling by 0.1 and it's just too much for the game. So just remember that when it comes to the build, all you can afford to do is put a race rear wing. It's very similar to how it was in Forza 6. The truth is, it's a car that feels like there's not much you can play around with. But what I love about it is because you're restricted, it really forces you to knuckle down on how you tune the car, okay? So with that said, let's go over to the tune and I will walk you through how I set it up to get a top 10 at Prague Full. So the tyre pressure, 29.5, 29.5. That's because it's stock tyres, so typically I will have the PSI a little bit higher just to help with the responsiveness. When it comes to the race tyres, then I am typically dropping it down to 27 or 28 because the race tyres, they typically heat up quicker anyway, and they usually have a lot of peak grip, so you don't want to over exploit that. The gearing is stock, as I mentioned. You are going to struggle with that first gear, but it's just something that you have to put up with, guys, because besides that, the car is absolutely fantastic. The alignment, look at this, a lot of negative camber, so you wouldn't probably want to do this on all tracks. On most race tracks you'd actually have it closer down to 2 or minus 1.5. The reason why we've done this is because we're at Prague, so there's lots of banking, there's quite a lot of corners that are on camber as well as off camber, so we've tried to make the tyres really slanted just so that at the highest speed corners there can be as much contact across that tyre on the road. So that is typically something you do for tracks like Prague and Alps if you're not aware. As for the toe, we've kept it as 0 and 0. You can add toe if you want, but with the way I've set this up with the anti-roll bars and springs, which I'm about to show you, adding positive toe actually might make it a bit too twitchy for you. Front caster we have left at 5 degrees. Anti-roll bars, what do you see? 1 on the front and 40 on the rear. So as I mentioned, we are really trying to push for oversteer. We want the car to sway a lot because unfortunately when you do have it how it is, it suffers a lot of inherent understeer. The car feels very heavy, it feels very stiff, so we need to combat this through the way that we tune the anti-roll bars as well as the springs. So as you can see, quite a substantial difference there, over £100 difference between the front springs and the rear springs. So we have 545 on the front and then 700 on the rear. The ride height we've basically just tried to balance out so they match up. The reason why I didn't leave this at 3.6 is simply because on some of the bumps, especially before turn 1, there's a certain curb that you actually want to ride because it allows you a few more feet or an extra couple of feet that just gives you a better angle of entry into the turn. And at 3.6 it was just kind of clipping the curb and bumping up and getting on shaky, so this seemed to be the best way for it. Onto the damping, rebound stiffness is 5.7, the rear is 6.0, bump stiffness is 2.3, the rear is 2.3. Onto the aero now, obviously we have the front aero which we cannot tune, so because of that and the fact that the car is inherently understeery, we've wanted to put some downforce on the rear but not the whole way because it actually makes the tail end of the car too planted, and with that unfortunately it's just going to feel very understeery on corner exit. So we've gone with 270 on the rear. Onto the braking, we've made it a 48% balance because I do want there to be just a tiny bit more weight on the rear tyres compared to the front, just so it actually forces some oversteer whilst we're decelerating, and because that's really important if you want to hook up a really good corner in the F50. And then as for the braking pressure, I've put it quite high. It's a lot higher than what I usually do, so we've gone with 170, but obviously just go with what feels comfortable to you. Now onto the differential. So acceleration is at 75%, deceleration is 25%. So this doesn't look that far from stock, to be honest, but truth be told, I really wanted to experiment because we want to force enough oversteer, so basically we want the rear wheel tyres to actually lock up whilst we're exiting turns, just to help shift the tail end of the car a bit further out, create that oversteer, and then we can have a faster curve coming out of a turn. But when I put it up to 100, it was kind of just making it too twitchy, and it would kind of get that snap oversteer, which is very suspect at low speed corners in this car. For the deceleration, we've put it up to 25%. Why have we done this? I did say that the car feels inherently understeery, but don't forget it's a mid-engine car, which they are always prone to oversteer when you're off throttle, so that's why I put it up to 25. And that is the tune itself done, guys. Now with that said, what I'll do is I'll just finish this video up with showing you what the lap looked like around Prague. That way you can just get a good idea as to how you have to drive this car. What I love about it is it's more of like precision driving. You're not having to constantly mess around with the braking and the throttle, like blipping the engine a lot. It's more so just about finding the exact braking point or turning point and then just committing to it, and then you can just flip on the throttle a bit if you need to adjust. So that's something that I'll let you see. Let's just go on to here. Okay, top 10 time. What time is that again? It is a 156.7. As I mentioned, guys, I do think this could get possibly a 0.6 or a 0.5. It would just take a really perfect lap, and as you'll see in this replay, it's kind of hard to extract that extra time, okay? But whilst I'm going through that as well, if you haven't subscribed already, guys, please do. If you're already subscribed, please like the video, and I also want you guys to tell me what you think are some of your favourite underrated cars in A Class. I want to know what cars that you think are not used often but are absolutely brilliant to drive. So I will change the view for you, put it onto the game camera, and I'll put on the telemetry as well, and that way I'll let you guys enjoy the lap. So here we are coming into turn 1. As I mentioned, you ride the curb on the left hand side just for a greater amount of curve you can put into the entry, blipping the throttle a fair amount, and you want to be able to plant it for most of the way here. You can see the car gets a little bit squirrely, but I'm hoping that you guys will find it pretty comfortable. I strongly recommend that you use sim steering in this car. Now onto this turn, the brake marker is pretty much that flag on the right hand side. You blip it a fair amount, and yeah, just make sure you get the most out of the car rotating by itself when it's off throttle, and then just balance the throttle as you're coming out of the curves, because if you just plant it all the way really early, you will feel that understeer in the car. And as you can see, I'm trying to extract every inch out of the track possible, nearly hitting the walls left, right and centre, and there are plenty of laps where I was on for flying times but just absolutely smashed the car from a over-ambitious yeet. But as you can see, we're just trying to get as close as we can to the inside walls, and then afford to just let off the steering a tiny bit. But other than that, the car does pick up really nicely, get really close to that wall yet again. This is an interesting turn. You want to try and clip this inside curve. I missed that, but I ride a lot of this curve on the outside, and then you just about touch the inside curve again. That is the best curve for this car, the best racing line, should I say. And then into the alley. I like to call it Crumble Alley. It's just the alley of death. You just have to completely commit to this and hope it works. So look, nearly scraped the wall here, nearly scraped the wall there, nearly scraped the wall on the outside as well. Come into this dreaded chicane, which is really difficult to execute correctly. And then just into the final turn, we're braking between the two lampposts on the right hand side, and then quite a wide exit. You don't need to do this, but on this lap it was just the fastest line that I had to go with due to my entry. So that is the lap, guys. I hope you have enjoyed the video. As I mentioned, please like and subscribe, it means a lot, and please comment below what are some of your favourite cars in A Class, which are very underused but in your preference are just brilliant cars to use. I'd also like some recommendations of other tuning guides you want to see in the future, guys. But I hope this helps you. Let me know what you think of this car, and until the next video, take care and we'll see you soon.